Welcome, everyone. I think we have some people popping on right now. My name is Jay Tremonti. I'm the high performance coordinator with the Richmond Olympic Oval. On the call with me from the Oval is Chris Spencer. Chris, you want to just say a quick hi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm the strength and conditioning lead in the Richmond at the Richmond Olympic Oval in the high performance department.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Chris. And so, yeah, tonight, we have the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the performance testing we did at the Volleyball BC Provincial Championships, and talk a little bit about some programs we have at the Oval that can help yourself or your son or daughter help achieve their volleyball goals. So the plan for this evening is to run through what we're working towards, what a world-class volleyball athlete looks like. Talk a little bit about how the athlete testing that took place stacks up to that world-class volleyball athlete, and how the Oval HP can help close the gap from where we're at right now to where we want to go. As mentioned, my name is Jay. I'm a former and current volleyball person as well. I coach at Douglas College, and I used to work with Volleyball BC as the technical director, managing the provincial team programs. Chris, you gave yourself a really good intro already, but you want to maybe just add a little bit of maybe sports specific context where you cut your teeth from a sports standpoint?
So my sport background was actually basketball. I've sort of continually worked with our provincial program throughout the summer and the fall. I've attended a few national championships and been fortunate enough to support a number of our athletes at national basketball or Team Canada sort of selection camps. And I'm currently completing my master's in high performance coaching and technical leadership at UBC.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
So for those of you who may or may not have been to the Richmond Oval before, it's an indoor multi-sport facility, as well as a venue to host a lot of tournaments. We also provide, and our department specifically provides a training space for a number of teams. The Oval was originally built as a host venue for the long track speed skating at the 2010 Vancouver Winter Games. And today it's, become a bit of a beacon in the city of Richmond as it attracts people from all over the world. As you can see in one of the photos, we're currently the home base for our senior women's national team. That includes the Next Gen team, as well as the National Excellence Program. And we also support a number of other organizations and teams this last year, providing strength and conditioning support for over 500 athletes. Through our support, we work with a number of different sports, obviously volleyball being one of the primary ones, but also ice hockey, basketball, field hockey, and speed skating just being some of them. You can go ahead, Jay. Next slide.
Okay, so when we talk about world-class athletes, what do we mean? What are we talking about? What are we working towards? And I really like this definition. It's from this paper that's on the screen below. But when we talk about world-class, we're really talking about Olympic medalists. So less than 100 days from now, you're going to see our men's team competing at the Olympics. We are going to see our women's team. They have yet to qualify, but I'm very confident and hopeful they will, as well as a few beach pairs and our sitting program as well. And so when we talk about world class, that's kind of what we're working towards, though, that Olympic medal performance. But to get there, there's a lot of different steps that athletes can possibly take. And everyone's journey towards that world-class performance could look a little different. And so when we talk about the context for athletes who did performance testing at the provincial championships, we're maybe keeping that world-class performance in mind because we don't know who will eventually get there. But we are looking to continue to elevate performance and help athletes get to maybe that next level, which I think for a lot of athletes that we're at that 16, 17, 18U level is potentially a provincial team program to represent the province. Maybe it's a regional program like the BC Summer Games. And then hopefully maybe a youth or age category world championship. So our 19U youth national team. So that's what we're really trying to work towards, and we'll help share what that looks like specifically compared to our testing. Um, I think a really good resource to help paint this picture too is the Volleyball Canada uh, long-term athlete development framework and resources they have on their website. Um, they have this really cool document that adds a little bit more context to that concept, and that's their development matrix. And in there, it provides some language and some definitions of what athlete development means. And it's really been a good guide from a coach standpoint, just understanding what are some of the key um, factors that I think are important for athlete and personal development. And it really helps guide everyone understanding, what are going to be some important factors here. So they take a really different approach than I think a lot of other sports and maybe countries in the sense that, the person is at the center of each athlete development experience. There's obviously an athlete and there's a volleyball player that needs to be developed, but there's a really person-centered approach. And from that building out, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the athletic development that some of the oval programs can provide, and some of the tests that we're doing was around the athlete development side of things. And again, it's a really good resource that helps kind of outline some of the important factors from a physical athletic side, but then also that person and player side too. So I just would really encourage everyone to take a look at it if you have more questions about, what does a world-class volleyball player look like as you're maybe starting or along your journey to that world-class performance. And so from that, I wanted to just share a little bit of a journey for this volleyball player from BC. His name is Brody Hofer. He is a former Langley Christian Lightning player. Played for the Trinity Western Spartans for 5 years. Also was able to represent Canada on a youth team and some B teams, and now is currently training in Gatineau with our senior A team. And so his journey was really interesting because if some of you may know him and his family. He's from a volleyball family. His parents are both coaches, players at 1.2. He's got a couple brothers that are also playing at a very high level. But Brody's journey was one where, he was a really good volleyball player from a young age, had a lot of skill. So when we talk about the world-class athlete, he's a really good player, but maybe wasn't the best athlete yet. And you can kind of see here in grade, I think this might have been grade 11 or grade 12, he was a good player, but if you went back and looked at some of his physical testing, he wasn't at the same standard as a lot of other players in BC. And so he was able to have success, make teams, get a really good volleyball opportunity at Trinity Western. But a really big changing point happened for him when, after the COVID year, he really focused in on his physical development sometime between this middle picture and the second picture. And he was able to, change his body physically. And so he went from touching, around 11, 2 or 3, all the way to now he's touching almost 12 feet at, I think 11 feet, 11 inches was the last time he's tested that he let me know when he saw me at provincials. So it's been quite the journey for him. And I think if you ask, what was the changing point for him, he talked a lot about just really dedicating himself to his body, not only from a physical development side of things, but also to be able to withstand the amount of training and volleyball he can play. And so, really cool story to just see how his growth has kind of gone. And now he's, fighting to be representing Canada at the Olympics in Paris. And I think a big part of the reason why he's already competing with the best in the world at such a young age is that physical development side of things. Over to you, Chris. I think you're on mute.
4 years into virtual meetings, and I'm still doing that. So as Jay alluded to, there's a number of pieces that not only break down the kind of physical component, but also the athlete as a whole. And so we talk about different pillars. The physical pillar, which we look to address through testing and training, but also there's the technical piece. So that's their skill, the tactical piece, which can be assessed through gameplay. And you'll see in really, really high level organizations where they look to assess athletes on their mental performance and their nutrition, which could be in the form of an athlete just providing a coach or a nutritionist with their kind of like dietary plan. But throughout an athlete's development, they may be required to perform testing, in some of these, or if not all of them, in all of those pillars. But the one certainly most common is the physical pillar, and this is used as an opportunity to sort of benchmark athletes and see how they compare against athletes who are further along in their development, but also how they compare against athletes who they're competing against at the same time. And the other reason that we really emphasize some of these tests is just knowing that athletes are going to be asked to perform them again and again and again. We see as coaches a certain level of maybe performance anxiety when we bring out a piece of equipment like the Vertec, which is what you're seeing in the two pictures. And so we're trying to provide athletes an opportunity to go through these tests in a setting that's low consequence and really just an opportunity for them to get reps, because as much as it is, largely assessing their physical piece, there also is a skill component to, almost any of the tests we go through. So assessing the physical pillars, we'll talk about the jump tests we did as well as a number of others that we often use. But you'll often see organizations assess technical skills. Maybe it's looking at serving and passing percentages and accuracy. Tactical assessments can be, really just looking at kind of gameplay. And then I mentioned, some organizations assessing mental performance, or your mental competence, maybe through things like a grit is often a skill or something that's monitored, or resilience, and nutrition as well. As far as test selection, usually what we're looking for is a few key performance indicators, or KPIs. So the jumps, for instance, are a really good example of athletes being able to showcase their offensive and defensive potential. But with all of our testing, we need to ensure things are comparable, and the jumps, for instance, are great because in volleyball, they're taken by most organizations. And so it allows us to not only look at the athletes that we've assessed, but also find comparable scores in the States or in Europe or in Asia. Obviously, equipment access comes into play, and we're extremely fortunate to have opportunities to expose athletes to a lot of different, kind of gold standards for testing. And then, of course, things like time and facility constraints. And the last piece I'll talk about is sort of like validity and reliability. And I've used this sort of diagram of the four shooting targets below. So having a test that is reliable, meaning it assesses something accurately, but does it really, if it's not valid, is it really assessing what you want it to assess? Something could be valid and not reliable. So it assesses, a skill you want, but how accurately does it really depict the athlete's ability? The third target is kind of something that's neither reliable nor valid. So, in that analogy, there's the targets being hit all over the place. And so what we really want to hone in on is assessments that are both reliable and valid, meaning we can repeat them, and the scores that the athletes give us something that is usable as coaches. Of course, whenever we test, there's variables. So, in the pictures shown there, which was 2 or 3 weekends ago at U18 championships, were on kind of like a soft sport court, similar to a volleyball court, whereas this previous weekend At the Trade X facility, we were on something like pavement. So the surface can obviously have a factor, but also kind of athlete fatigue. And there's a number of other factors that can come into play. These were probably the two, I suppose, big ones from this the last few weekends. Go ahead, Jay.
Okay, so what does our testing protocols look like? This is something that Volleyball Canada has done a really good job being leaders in terms of just having a very standardized process for provinces and clubs and then organizations like the Oval to conduct. And so for the 2 weekends, when we had the opportunity working with Volleyball BC, it was really straightforward for us to pick a couple tests. I think just given the nature of the weekend and everything that's going on and the facility constraints, time constraints. Our spike touch and our block touch tests are going to be our biggest bang for our buck tests for most players to assess their current physical performance, and then subsequently use this test results to track development over the course of a year, season, physical plan, athletic plan, and whatnot. So, you see on the right here, Chris is holding on to a Vertec. That's the pretty well standard device. I do think it is the company name, or that's the specific brand is called a Vertec, but you might hear it called a jump measuring device. And so it's set and measured out to pre-select heights where you can go up, swing, and hopefully reach as high as you can and touch the highest rung or little flipper there that you can kind of see that some are folded over and some are standing straight there. So it does a pretty good job of seeing how high we touch relative to the ground, which is a pretty quick and easy number that a lot of coaches, technical leaders, players, athletes, parents can use to be like, see how high they are. So we'll go over the test results shortly here, but those were the two tests we did. For the spike touch, it's fairly simple. You take a spike approach, so 3 or 4 steps, you swing and you try and touch as high as you can. We typically try and say, after you are unsuccessful in touching higher twice is when you stop testing. But typically, if athletes want to give it another try or two, and there's no harm in doing that. It's just usually a time constraint piece, and then fatigue usually starts setting in if you're jumping 4 or 5 times in a row. For the block touch, this one's a little bit more structured where you're doing a block move, standing right underneath the device, no lead up approach, using 2 hands, going down, jumping, and making a block like move. So both of those two jump tests gives us a really good idea of how high the athlete has the potential to spike the ball at and how high the athlete has to potentially block the ball at. Again, there's a lot of other good volleyball tests that I think are picking up a little bit more steam as people are starting to conduct them a bit more. Again, with those two jumping tests, there are some positions that a spike touch and a block touch maybe aren't a strong physical performance indicator for success in that role. I'm sure there's some liberos out there or parents of liberos. The spike touch and block touch maybe isn't the best indicator for how they can perform their duties as a libero. But again, it's a good just general volleyball test that we can quickly execute on. Some of the other tests that we would do in a normal program situation is looking at attack velocity. So how high you can attack a high ball in speed, kilometers an hour. There's a little radar gun that is pretty popular now that a lot of programs use. We could also look at serve velocity, and we know the higher you can hit the ball with the spike touch test, and the harder you can hit the ball with the velocity test, the more success you're going to have putting your team in good situations. The 363 is just a volleyball version of like a pro agility test. And so this is a really good one to see how, quick players are. Liberos, this one's a little bit maybe more of emphasized, where, there's a change of direction, and to see how much court you can cover in a 3 meter shuffle, 6 meter shuffle, and then another 3 meter shuffle. I think the only con to that one is that, there's no real decision making and reaction like you would see in a game. So it's a little bit of a artificial scenario to be assessing agility. And then the last one here is just a reactive strength index. So this one, really speaks to how athletes are able to generate force in a rapid situation. So it just involves looking at potentially doing a certain type of jump on a force plate, or with potentially with a jump mat. So those are some of the tests you could potentially see in volleyball. Again, ones that we've used here at the Oval for volleyball, but then for other programs as well. But for all the test results we're going through, it's going to be the spike touch and the block touch. So I'm going to quickly go through these. I think most like there's going to be a range of athletes here in terms of the like the you know who's on the call, but we have our results on the left, from the 15U, 16U provincials that we just took place in Abbotsford. You can see the positional breakdowns. So the highest spike and block touch for the outside hitters. Then there was the lowest one that was recorded, and then there's an average. So that can start to give you an idea of, hey, this is the range of athletes that were at this competition that participated in testing. We had almost, I believe, just under 500 athletes take place or participate. So, a good amount of athletes came by from a range of clubs. So I feel like this gives us a decent picture of, what the kind of profile of an athlete playing in this tournament looked like. A couple things to note here is, this profile doesn't say, hey, if I jump the highest, I'm the best volleyball player, nor does it say if I jump the lowest, I'm the least good volleyball player. I think it gives us a picture of what the profile of an athlete is, and gives us some normative data to potentially, assess, hey, this is where I'm at, and this is where I'm at relative to my peers. Um, Again, you'll see kind of the middle blocker opposite position. They typically kind of have, a little bit more physicality to those roles just because of the nature of them. They're a little more specialized, whereas, your outside hitter, setter, and then libero typically will maybe test a little bit lower. I think it's really interesting to note that, we had some really high touching athletes at the event. So you can see here the max spike touch that we saw, which was 10-4, is at an international standard for volleyball players in the world. Over on the right, you can see it's mislabeled here, but the Team BC athletes for females at the 16U level, you can kind of see some of the ranges we'll see. And then at the bottom, you can see Kiera Van Ryk, who's one of our Team BC alumni and senior national team athletes. She's touching 10-4, and we had about 3 girls who were able to touch 10-4, 10-3. So super exciting to see that potential at, that 16U age, and, competing with some of the very best in the world, which Kiera is one of the top outside hitter opposites in the world, currently playing in Turkey professionally. So, yeah, very exciting to see. I think, again, this chart over here on the right has some of the standards for provincial team athletes from the 16U level. So it gives you a bit of an idea. It has the best and the average. Again, these indicators I wouldn't say are necessarily selection criteria per se, but it hopefully helps paint a picture of, hey, this is what the provincial team athletes who were selected to the team test at. Here's my current test results. How do I get from where I'm at to where I want to potentially be if it is a provincial team, which I think is an important step on that pathway towards world-class performance. I think I've shared this information with everyone who completed the testing. So yeah, please feel free to refer back to that. Looking here at the girls testing results. Again, some of the same numbers that we're seeing here. I think we just reviewed some of them, so I'm going to just skip through that. And then, yeah, looking at the 17 and 18U results, we had a little bit less athletes tested this one, so I wouldn't necessarily say that the testing pool for the girls on the left and the boys is completely reflective of the group, just because I think the schedule of the tournament was a little bit more difficult to come try some testing. But again, you can still start to see a bit of the picture of, hey, this is where the volleyball BC athletes were. Each individual athlete has their own kind of testing results, and you can see, how do I stack up to, in this case, youth national team athletes. So athletes who were selected to our youth 18 and 19 and under national teams. Again, some really exciting physical results. You're seeing a lot of athletes, both on the male and female side, test at that youth national team level, but then even beyond, just as athletes are becoming more and more mature physically. So again, some super exciting results here, and yeah, a lot of good information to kind of take your results from your testing and look to see how it stacks up with the best in Canada and the world. Okay, so we've talked about what world-class performance is. We've identified some key tests to help assess physical performance. And we now have an idea of how our assessment is to what that world-class performance is. And so, there's, I think this concept, comes probably from the business world, and sports stole it, but we have this gap in performance of, where we are and where we want to go. And so I think that the job of coaches, of athletes, of programs and technical leaders is to see, hey, how do we close that gap to get from where we are to where we're going? And so that's what we're going to talk about next with some of the Oval HP programs, and talk about how we can get you from where you're at right now from a physical standpoint to where you want to be.
So if we look at where the athletes are, there's a number of, I guess, kind of like simple or maybe low-hanging fruits, kind of like a good analogy. But my primary goal is always just to initially improve their biomechanics in their most global movements. So that's basically like allowing athletes to subconsciously organize themselves in positions that are, mechanically optimal to, in volleyball, produce a jump as high as they can. And the sport environment isn't always going to allow them to get into that perfect position, especially the competition environment. But if we can get as close to as close as we can to replicating that in as many of our jumps per se, it allows us to not only, potentially jump at a higher level more frequently, but also sort of like reduce the likelihood of injury. So that my first goal is always just improving those biomechanics. The second aspect is really just addressing their lower body and upper body strength. We need to establish a good strength base in order to build upon it. Think of this as kind of like the base of a pyramid, or the foundation of a pyramid. And so every layer that we want to add, it needs to sit on a strong foundation. And once these athletes have a baseline level of strength, well, then we can start to implement things like, lower body power, so their jumping ability, or upper body, maybe velocity in their arm swing. And that's where we really start to kind of piece things together in the elite level, the Brody Hoffers, the Keir Van Rijks, start to become closer or within reach. The third piece is kind of like that injury prevention piece. I guess the first thing I should say is, like, I am a really big supporter of the multi-sport athlete development model, but having worked in basketball especially, for a long time, I realized that it's not really a reality as much anymore. So my role is to try to ensure we can do what we can to allow the athletes to not only get through what they need to get through, but to kind of thrive in their environment. Um, so there's things we can do to strengthen their hips and their trunk, and then also their ankles and their knees, and their shoulders, just to allow them to kind of get through their high school season, their club season, and kind of train year round. And the last piece, which is really important to me, and this is probably the benefit in in-person coaching sessions, is I really place a high importance on educating and enabling the athletes. maybe it's not so much a perfect, I guess, business model, but I like to allow athletes to become a little bit more autonomous so they're less reliant on someone like me because realistically, while a good chunk of their training could be done under the supervision of a strength and conditioning coach, either, in a sort of private setting like we might provide at the Richmond Oval or their high school or college, or even at the professional level. There is ultimately going to be a component of it they need to do on their own, and so we try to help with that. Jay, next slide. So as far as the programming offerings that we're looking to provide athletes for this summer, so our primary kind of like in-person program is going to have one strength and conditioning session per week with one of our coaches. And during that session, we will utilize an app called Team Builder that allows us to give the athletes a copy of their program, allows them to input all the data that they go through, so their weights, their reps, and really allows us to track their progress. The benefit of using Team Builder is it allows us to provide athletes with additional days of programming, which we will. And so this summer, what we're looking to give them is 2 additional strength sessions that they can do on their own, whether it's at a community center or their high school gym, as well as one, sort of what we refer to as mobility or bulletproofing session, targeting those kind of like hip and trunk stability. Some of those things they can do with little to no equipment and at their own home. And then also a piece of that will be giving the athletes the tools they need to improve in their recovery. So, what skills can they take with them that will allow them to go into a tournament like the ones they just competed in, and manage their kind of the wear and tear on their body that's sustained throughout, the number of jumps they need to get through the number of games they have to play. Additionally, we're going to be looking to provide some nutritional information. We need to kind of assess where the athletes are at with this piece of thing to, in order to sort of provide, I guess, some content that will be useful to them. And we're hoping to provide some component of addressing the mental performance piece. Athletes who enroll in the program will also have a opportunity to access a novel membership at a reduced rate. It's kind of like a Volleyball BC group rate. Next slide, Jay. So this final slide just kind of summarizes the program. The off-season program in the upper left is the one I just spoke of. It breaks down the cost and the timing of the program there. The program in the green box is something we're going to provide that's new this year. We obviously realize there are a number of athletes and families on this call who are located outside the Lower Mainland or where the Richmond Oval is not accessible, and so utilizing the Team Builder app, we'll look to provide similar programming. Athletes will obviously be relied upon or expected to kind of complete the program to the best of their ability on their own. So this takes out the component of one-on-one coaching, which is extremely valuable in my eyes, but allows athletes who might not otherwise have adequate support to at least get a high level of strength and conditioning support, with an opportunity to work with a coach in some capacity and get feedback on their movements and get help when it's needed. And yeah, I mean that basically summarizes things. Jay, I don't know if there's another slide after that or if we're just opening up to questions now.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. And yeah, I think obviously, like, the Richmond Oval is in Richmond. And we have a lot of really strong world-class strength coaches. But yeah, we're super excited to at least have that virtual option where, you know, I think it's our best case scenario if you don't have access to that world-class strength coaches. Hey, can you uh, use a program, follow a program? We'll support athletes with a few different check-ins throughout that process, virtual correspondence, and yeah, see if we can at least start building that foundation from a physical development standpoint, so that As athletes progress along their journey, they're a little bit more equipped for the next time they either start a strength and conditioning program with maybe their college or university or their 18U club team. Um, so yeah, we're super excited about that opportunity. So um, yeah, I think that's it. I don't have any questions. Again, Chris and I's contact information is in the email. Please fire away. Again, we also we'll share the recording of this with everyone. So again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. And best of luck to all those athletes and families competing at nationals in the coming weeks. Uh, Take care, and yeah, hopefully the Canucks are winning right now.